I'm 32 years old, and I still can't sleep with the curtains open, not cracked an inch, fully shut, every night. My girlfriend used to laugh about it when we first moved in together. She thought it was one of those weird habits people pick up as kids and never grow out of, like needing the TV on to fall asleep, or checking the front door twice before bed. She used to tease me in summer because our bedroom gets stupidly warm, and she'd say, opening the curtains at least a little would make the room feel less boxed in. I always told her no, not because I'm scared of someone looking in, not because I'm paranoid, and not because I think there's something out there now. It's because when I was 12 years old, I woke up in the middle of the night and saw something standing in our back garden. And even now, 20 years later, I still don't know what it was. We lived in a quiet village in the north of England, the kind of place where nothing ever happened and people liked it that way. Detached houses, trimmed hedges, one corner shop, one pub, and a row of gardens backing onto a narrow strip of trees, and a farmer's field beyond that. During the day it was boring. At night it felt very black. My bedroom was at the back of the house on the first floor. From my window, I could see our whole garden, the fence line, the apple tree near the shed, and the dark strip at the very back, where the grass gave way to weeds and tangled branches from the trees beyond the fence. I used to like that window. In the daytime, I'd sit there and look out while doing homework I wasn't really doing. In winter, I'd watch frost settle on the lawn. In summer, I'd sleep with the curtains wide open, because I liked waking up to early light. That stopped in one night. It was late August. I know that because school was due to start again in a few days, and I remember being in a foul mood about it. My parents had already gone to bed. My younger sister's room was across the landing. The whole house was quiet, in that dead way houses get after midnight, when even the pipes seem to settle and the walls creak more than they do in the day. I woke up for no reason I could explain. No bad dream. No sound loud enough to pull me out of sleep. I just opened my eyes suddenly, like someone had called my name from very far away. The room was dim blue with moonlight. My curtains were still open. For a few seconds I just lay there, half asleep, staring toward the window, not really thinking. Then I realized I wasn't looking at the garden. I was looking at someone standing in it. At first my brain refused to make sense of what I was seeing. It just looked wrong. A dark shape near the back fence, too still to be a person shifting their weight, too tall to be one of the shrubs or the apple tree, throwing a shadow. It was standing in the part of the garden where the moonlight reached the grass clearly, and it was facing the house. I froze and kept staring, waiting for the shape to turn into something normal. A coat on the fence, a trick of the branches, one of those half-dream things where your eyes are open, but your mind hasn't caught up yet. But the longer I looked, the worse it got, because it wasn't just tall, it was narrow in a way people aren't narrow. The shoulders looked wrong, too high maybe, or too sharp. Its head seemed tilted slightly to one side, and even from that distance I had the sick, crawling feeling that it wasn't just standing there randomly. It was looking directly up at my bedroom. I remember pulling the duvet right up to my chin like that could do anything. I remember not blinking, because I was afraid that if I looked away for even a second, it would move, and I'd miss where it went. Then it did move. Not much. Just enough. Its head straightened. Slowly. Like it had realized I was awake. That was the first moment I felt real fear. Not childish fear. Not the fear of a nightmare, or a noise in the dark. This was colder than that. This was the feeling of understanding that something outside had noticed you specifically, I wanted to shout for my dad. I wanted to get out of bed and run across the landing. But I couldn't seem to move properly. I could breathe. I could think. But every part of me had gone stiff. And then the thing in the garden took one step forward. It wasn't a big step. That was part of what made it so wrong. If a person had been in our garden at that hour, they would have moved like a person. Quick, awkward, maybe looking around to see if anyone else had noticed them. But this thing moved with this horrible, careful slowness, like it knew I was watching and didn't care. Or worse, wanted me to. I still couldn't make out details properly. The moonlight gave me shape, not features. It was too far from the house for that. But I could tell it was tall enough that if it stood right beside our back fence, the top of its head would have come level with it. And that fence was 6 foot, maybe taller. That's the detail people always get hung up on when I tell parts of this story. They say perspective at night is strange. They say kids misjudge height. They say shadows can stretch in moonlight. Fine. Maybe they're right. But shadows do not take steps. It moved again. Another slow step toward the middle of the garden, and I remember thinking with this sudden stupid desperation that if it came under the apple tree, I'd see it properly. I did not want to see it properly, but I also couldn't stop looking. Then a cloud passed over the moon, and the whole garden dimmed. Not black, just darker. The sort of change that should have made the thing harder to see. Instead, it somehow stood out more. It looked thinner, longer. The shape of it seemed to shift when the light changed, not like it was physically changing, but like my eyes could no longer force it into something ordinary. The arms hung too low. The head wasn't round the way a human head should be, and the posture had this awful stiffness to it, like it was either pretending to stand upright or had only recently learned how. That was when I found my voice. I shouted for my dad, not loudly at first, more like a strangled call. Then again, louder, and the second I made noise, the thing moved fast. Not toward the house, sideways. 1 second it was in the open part of the garden, and the next it crossed toward the apple tree in these sharp, loping strides that were so sudden and unnatural. I jerked backward in bed so hard I nearly fell out. I screamed then, properly. My bedroom door flew open seconds later, and my dad came in half awake, angry first, then immediately alarmed when he saw me pointing at the window. I couldn't get words out properly. I kept saying, "There's someone there. There's someone in the garden." He went straight to the window. And this is the part that used to make me doubt myself years later when I was trying to be rational about it. He didn't say, "There's nothing there." He went quiet, properly quiet, not humoring me, not calming me down, just staring out into the garden, in silence for long enough that I started crying. Then he said very flatly, "Stay here." He left my room, and a few seconds later, I heard the back door open downstairs. That scared me almost as much as the thing itself, because my dad was not the type to charge outside over nothing. If he went out there, it meant he had seen enough of something to take it seriously. I scrambled out of bed and went to the landing. From there I could hear my mom asking what was going on. My dad didn't answer her properly. He just told her to stay inside with us. I heard the kitchen light click on. Then the outside security light came on in the garden, flooding the lawn with that ugly yellow glow. For a moment I thought that would be the end of it. Whatever it was would be gone. Some weirdo, some animal, some mistake. But then my dad shouted, not in fear, in anger. The kind of shout adults use when they're trying to sound bigger than they feel. "Get out of my garden!" I ran back into my room and looked out again. My dad was near the back of the lawn in his t-shirt and trousers, standing under the security light with one arm out, pointing toward the fence line. And there, half hidden near the apple tree, was the thing. I saw more of it then than I ever wanted to. It was crouched, but even crouched it was too large. Its back looked narrow and hunched, the limbs long in a way that made no sense. Not muscular, not bulky, just stretched. It had one arm braced against the ground and the other hanging oddly, and its head was turned toward my dad. I couldn't see a clear face. I'm glad I couldn't. What I could see was enough. The shape of a jaw too long to be human, and eyes that reflected the security light in a dull animal way for just a second before it moved. It cleared the fence without touching it, not climbed, not scrambled, cleared it. One movement, low and fast, over the fence and into the dark strip of trees beyond the garden, like gravity barely meant anything to it. My dad stepped back. I saw him do it. Just one step. He didn't chase it. He stood absolutely still, staring into the trees, and after a few seconds, he slowly backed toward the house, without taking his eyes off the fence line. He locked the back door the second he came in. Then he pulled every curtain in the house shut. The next part is what bothered me for years. My parents did not handle it the way I expected. They didn't call the police. They didn't sit me down and tell me it was a fox. They didn't even really try to explain it. My mom kept saying I'd had a fright and that everything was fine now. But her voice had that forced, brittle sound people use when they are trying not to make something worse. My dad said almost nothing at all. He checked every downstairs window twice. Then he told me, in a tone that made it sound like an instruction rather than comfort, "From now on, you keep those curtains shut at night. Understood?" I asked him what he'd seen. He said, "I don't know." That should have made me feel better. It didn't, because it was obvious he was lying. Not about every part of it, maybe, but about enough. He knew more than he was saying. I could see it in his face. He looked embarrassed almost. Not because of me, because of the thing itself, as if putting it into words would make it too real. I barely slept that night. Every tiny noise outside had me staring at the curtains, imagining something on the other side of them, close enough to touch the glass. In the morning, my dad went out into the garden before breakfast. I watched him from the kitchen. He spent a long time near the back fence and under the apple tree. When he came in, his hands were dirty. I asked him if there were footprints. He just said, "Nothing useful." Again, that would have sounded normal if I hadn't already seen his face. He was avoiding the truth in this really deliberate way, not dismissing it, avoiding it. For the next week, things changed in little ways. My dad installed a second security light facing the back fence. He started checking the garden before bed. He told my sister not to go outside alone in the evening anymore. And every single night, before going upstairs, he pulled the kitchen blind down himself and made sure the latch on the back door was set properly. None of that sounds dramatic. That's why it bothered me. If he thought I'd imagined it, none of that would have happened. A few days later, I tried bringing it up again. We were in the garage together, and I asked him straight what he'd seen that night. He stayed quiet for so long I thought he was ignoring me. Then he said, "When I was about your age, something was getting into my dad's chickens." That was all he said at first, and I remember standing there waiting because I knew there was more. He put a screwdriver down on the workbench and leaned on it with both hands. Then he said, "My dad sat up one night with a torch and a shovel by the back door. Said foxes had been around." I asked what that had to do with anything. He looked at me and said, "He saw something by the coop. Not a fox, I felt cold straight away. What was it? He gave this tiny shrug that wasn't a shrug at all, more like a man rejecting the question. He never gave it a name, he said, just told us if we ever saw something standing still in the garden at night, we were to come inside and shut the curtains, never stand at the window looking at it, never go outside to get a better look. That hit me harder than the thing itself had, because suddenly, the worst part of that night wasn't that I had seen something. It was that my father had recognized it, or at least recognized the kind of experience. I asked him if it was the same thing my granddad had seen, and he said something I still think about now. He said, "I hope not." That was it. He wouldn't say any more. No dramatic warning, no folklore, no story about monsters or local legends. Just that, "I hope not." After that, the subject was dead in the house. My mom clearly hated even the mention of it. My dad never brought it up again. Life went on. School started. The weather changed. The garden looked harmless in daylight. But I never opened those curtains at night again. Not once. About 3 months later, I nearly convinced myself the whole thing had just been one awful night. Then winter came, and I heard it outside my window. It was just after midnight, cold enough that the glass had fogged slightly at the corners. I was in bed reading with the curtains already shut, and I heard a sound from the garden below. Not a bang, not scratching, just one slow crunch of frost under weight. I sat completely still. Then another. It was moving across the garden. I remember staring at the curtains, waiting for the sound to continue toward the fence line and disappear. Instead, it stopped directly beneath my window. No more footsteps, just silence, the sort of silence that feels active, like something is choosing not to make noise. I put the book down and looked toward the door, thinking about going to get my dad, but I didn't move. I think some part of me was hoping it would go away if I stayed quiet enough. Then came the sound that settled this into me for life. A slow drag against the outside wall. Not claws, not nails. More like something rough brushing brick as it shifted its weight. It moved upward slightly, then stopped. My bedroom was on the first floor. I need you to understand that. Whatever was outside was not just standing in the garden anymore. It was up against the wall below my window somehow, or reaching, or leaning, or doing something I still do not have a sensible explanation for. I heard one soft tap against the glass. Just one. I ran out of that room so fast I hit the landing wall with my shoulder. My dad was already coming out of his room, and before I could even speak, he said, "Did you hear it?" That question has never left me. Not, "What happened?" Not, "Are you all right?" Not, "What did you hear?" Did you hear it? I nodded. He went downstairs immediately. Not outside this time, just downstairs. He turned on the back light, checked the locks, shut off every downstairs light that faced the garden, then came back up and told me I was sleeping in my sister's room for the night. The next day, he nailed the old trellis more firmly to the wall beneath my window and installed one of those cheap spiked strips meant to stop cats getting onto ledges and fences. He never admitted what that meant. He didn't have to. He was trying to stop something from getting purchased under my window. Nothing like that ever happened again while I lived at home. Not directly. No more taps. No more shapes in the garden that I saw with my own eyes. But there were things. A security light coming on for no reason. The bin knocked over without any clear animal mess. My dad standing at the kitchen sink late at night with the blind lifted just slightly, looking out into the dark. Then I moved out, got older, and did what everyone does. I buried it under normal life. Job, rent, relationships, routine, but I still shut the curtains every night. A few years ago, after my dad had a few drinks at Christmas, I asked him again. I said, "What did you really see in the garden that night?" He stared at his glass for a bit, then said, "Something that shouldn't have been able to move the way it moved." That was the closest he ever came to honesty. He died last year, and I'll never get any more than that out of him now. So this is where I've landed. I don't know what was in our garden when I was 12. I don't know what my grandfather saw near those chicken coops all those years earlier. And I don't know what tapped once on my bedroom window in the middle of winter from the outside of a first-floor wall. What I do know is this: I still can't sleep with the curtains open. And on the rare nights my girlfriend forgets and leaves them cracked a little before bed, I shut them without even looking outside first. Because some habits are habits, and some are promises you make to yourself after you realize something was looking back. There is one reason I finally decided to write this down. If it had only happened when I was 12, I probably could have kept dismissing it for the rest of my life. I could have called it a half-seen animal, a bad night, a child's memory, warped by fear and darkness. But that is not why I still shut the curtains. The real reason happened 3 weeks after my dad's funeral. I was back at my parents' house with my girlfriend, helping my mom sort through loft boxes and old paperwork. By then, the place already felt different. Empty in a way that didn't just mean one person was missing. My dad had been one of those men whose presence filled a house without him even trying. After he was gone, every room felt slightly too still. We stayed later than we planned and ended up sleeping there. Not in my old bedroom. Mom had turned that into a spare room years ago. We took the front guest room instead, and before bed, I did what I always do without thinking. I checked the curtains twice to make sure they were fully shut. My girlfriend noticed and smiled at me like she always did, but she didn't say anything. Sometime in the night, I woke up needing the toilet. I lay there for a second, getting my bearings, listening to the house. It was silent, properly silent, the sort of silence that only exists in houses where everyone else is asleep. Then I heard a soft sound from the back of the house. Not loud, not violent, just a small dry knock. I remember lying there with my eyes open, waiting for it to happen again. It did. 3 slow taps. From the back of the house, from the direction of the kitchen. My blood went cold so fast it felt like I'd fallen into water, because there was only one window at the back of the house that made that exact sound when something touched the glass. The kitchen window. The one my dad used to stand at late at night, with the blind lifted just slightly. I got out of bed and stepped onto the landing. I didn't want to wake my girlfriend. I don't know why. Maybe because some part of me already knew I was about to confirm something I had spent years trying not to confirm. The landing was dark, but there was enough moonlight leaking around the edges of the curtains downstairs to see. I started down the stairs as quietly as I could, and halfway down, I stopped. The kitchen blind was raised about 3 inches, just enough for someone standing at the sink to look out. I knew for a fact I'd seen it fully shut before bed. I stood there frozen, one hand on the banister, staring at that thin black gap above the windowsill. Then I heard it again, one soft tap on the glass, from the other side. I should have gone back upstairs. I should have woken my mom, woken my girlfriend, turned on every light in the house. Instead, I stepped off the stairs and walked toward the kitchen. I do not know why. Maybe because it was my dad's house. Maybe because he was gone. Maybe because some stupid part of me thought if I saw it properly. Now, after all these years, I could finally be done with it. I reached the kitchen doorway and looked at the window. Nothing was visible through the gap except darkness and the faint reflection of the room behind me. Then, very slowly, something moved across that gap outside. Not a full face, not a body, just the top part of something passing the window at a height no person should have been able to reach from the garden path. A shape, dark and narrow, moving with that same careful slowness I remembered from childhood. I couldn't breathe. And then, from outside the glass came one last sound. A fingernail, dragging once, lightly, across the window. I turned on the kitchen light so hard I nearly broke the switch. The garden outside flooded into view. Pathway, fence, shed, nothing there. Absolutely nothing. I checked the back door, locked. Checked the blind. The bottom edge was cold in my hand and slightly bent outward, like something had pressed against the glass beneath it. I didn't sleep again that night. In the morning, I asked my mom if she had touched the blind. She looked at me for a long second and said no. Then she asked me why. I nearly told her. I nearly said everything. But I looked at her face and realized something I should have understood years earlier. My dad had not kept quiet because he didn't know what to say. He kept quiet because once you say a thing out loud, it belongs in the house with you. So I told her it was nothing. I went home that afternoon, shut the curtains in my own bedroom, and stood there with my hands still on the fabric for a while longer than I needed to. That was 3 years ago. Nothing has tapped on my window since. Nothing has stood in my garden that I've seen. But every now and then, usually when I'm staying somewhere unfamiliar, I'll wake in the middle of the night and feel that same old dread before I even open my eyes. The feeling that something outside knows exactly where I am. And on those nights, I keep perfectly still. I listen, and I wait for the sound that would prove I was never imagining any of it at all.